Tennessee.
I ask consent that the senator from North Carolina and I be allowed to engage in colloquy for 20 minutes, and following that, senator from Iowa will be recognized.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, the senator from North Carolina and I were both involved in intercollegiate athletics. He was a scholarship athlete at Wake Forest University, and I was a non-scholarship track person at Vanderbilt University several years before that. We're here today to make a few comments on the recent ruling by a regional director of the National Labor Relations Board that defines student athletes as employees of the university. It affects only private universities, not the University of Tennessee, but it would affect Wake Forest, where the senator from North Carolina was an outstanding football player, and would affect Vanderbilt, where I attended. And I guess our message to the NCAA and intercollegiate athletics is, we hope that they will understand that the opinion of one regional director of the National Labor Relations Board is not the opinion of the entire federal government. That's the message I would like to deliver. And I would refer back, and then I'll go to the senator from North Carolina. 25 years ago, when I was president of the University of Tennessee, I was asked to serve on the Knight Commission on Intercollegiate Athletics. It was headed by the president of North Carolina, Bill Friday, and the head of Notre Dame, Father Hesper. Pretty distinguished group of individuals from around the country to take a look at intercollegiate athletics. And the major conclusion they came to was that presidents need to assert more institutional control over athletics. But here's something that this group of university presidents and others emphasize. They said, we reject the argument that the only realistic solution to the problem of intercollegiate athletics, and there have always been some, is to drop the student-athlete concept, put athletes on the payroll, and reduce or even eliminate their responsibility as students. Such a scheme has nothing to do with education, the purpose for which colleges and universities exist. Scholarship athletes are already paid in the most meaningful way possible, with a free education. The idea of intercollegiate athletics is that the teams represent their institutions as true members of the student body, not hired hands. Surely American higher education has the ability to devise a better solution to the problems of intercollegiate athletics than making professionals out of the players, which is no solution at all, but rather an unacceptable surrender to despair. This was the Knight Commission 25 years ago. Now I would ask the senator from North Carolina, do you not think, Senator Burr, that while there may be some issues with intercollegiate athletics, and we can talk about what some of those are, that unionization of intercollegiate athletics is not the solution to the problem?
Well, let me say to my good friend, the senator from Tennessee, who not only was a walk-on track member at Vanderbilt, but was the president of the University of Tennessee, the governor of Tennessee, the secretary of education, and now a United States senator. His credentials allow him to say whatever he wants to on this issue with a degree of knowledge. That it was Teddy Roosevelt who identified the challenges of college football, and through his attempt to get Harvard and Yale and a couple of other universities to address the risk, the NCAA was created. And the amazing thing to Senator Alexander and to myself is that we've got this governing body today that, by all practical observations, has done a great job at regulating college sports. It's the reason we have fabulous playoffs. It's the reason that we've got integrity in the scholarship system, but more importantly, it's the reason that we've got top quality athletes who go into these schools where less than 1% become pros. 99% of them are reliant on a great education for a fabulous outcome in life. And to do anything that changes the balance of what they've been able to create is ludicrous. And I think what troubles me, and I think it troubles Senator Alexander, is these aren't some misguided college football players. This is the steel workers. Let me say that again because I don't think people understand. This is the United Steelworkers who have put up the money so that these players from Northwestern would go to the NLRB and say, we want to unionize at Northwestern University. Well, on the face of it, it creates a great inequity between public and private schools, where we've got a governing body that tries to make this process as equitable as it can. But let me make this point. If you want to drive the rest of schools out of major sports, then do this. Only 10% of our nation's athletic programs make money. That means 90% of them lose in the athletic department, but for the quality of life of all students, not just athletes, they continue and their alumni continue to subsidize it. I agree with my good friend from Tennessee. This would be a huge mistake, and it's time for those players at Northwestern to think about more than those individuals who have fronted them the money to bring this case.
Well, I think the Senator from North Carolina, and the question should be obvious, is what does a student at Wake Forest or Vanderbilt and we're using the private universities again because those are the only ones affected by these decisions. But if you're at Vanderbilt University, according to the Vice Chancellor, the total scholarship could be as nearly $60,000. That's the value each year of your athletic scholarship. Times 4, so you're up to $250,000. The College Board says that roughly estimates that a college degree adds $1 million to your earnings during a lifetime. So the idea that student athletes don't get anything in return for their playing a sport is financially wrong. And just speaking as one individual who had a privilege of participating for 2 years as a student athlete without getting anything, I mean, I had scholarships, but they weren't athletic scholarships. The discipline, the memories, the competition, the chance to be in the Southeastern Conference tournament, I mean, that's very important to me. It was then, just as athletics always is. It's a rare privilege to participate in intercollegiate athletics. And the presidents have looked at the problems of intercollegiate athletics, and there are some, but people forget, and I wonder if the senator from North Carolina, I know, is aware of this. But let's say you're at Vanderbilt and you have a $58,000 scholarship, tuition, room and board, and let's say you come from a poor family that has no money, and you're put in the embarrassing position of not having walking around money to go out and get a hamburger or whatever you want to do. 40% of student athletes in America also have a Pell Grant, because 40% of all students in America have a Pell Grant, and the Pell Grant can be, on average, $3,600. So that's $300 a month that could be added. Now, perhaps there are other issues that ought to be addressed, but I wonder if the senator from North Carolina would speak more about one thing he talked about. I imagine Florida State, the University of Tennessee, Stanford, maybe Wake Forest, they'll all be fine with a more expensive athletic program. But what's going to happen to the smaller schools? What's going to happen to the minor sports? What's going to happen to the Title IX women's sports if, for some reason, a union forces universities to have a much more expensive athletic program for a few sports?
Well, let me say to my good friend from Tennessee, I'll quote the words of Wake Forest President Nathan Hatch, former provost at Notre Dame, in an editorial he wrote in the Wall Street Journal just this week. He says, and I quote, "To call student athletes employees is an affront to those players who are taking full advantage of the opportunity to get an education. Do we really want to signal to society and high school students that making money is the reason to come play a sport in college as opposed to getting an education that will provide a lifetime benefit?" And President Patrick Harker, president of the University of Delaware, in the same article said, "Turning student athletes into salaried employees would endanger the existence of varsity sports on many college campuses. Only about 10% of Division I college sports programs turn a profit, and most of them, like ours, $28 million worth of athletic program at the University of Delaware, lose money." Changing scholarship dollars into salary would almost certainly increase the amount of schools that have to drop sports, since earnings, the amount of schools have to spend on sports, since the earnings are taxed and scholarships are not. In order just to match the value of a scholarship, the university would have to spend more. And at Wake Forest, let me say, today, a scholarship is worth $45,600 in tuition and fees, $15,152 in room and board, $1,100 in books, and I'll say to my good friend from Tennessee, I'm not sure if there's still $15 of laundry money a month that exists under a scholarship. That's what it was when I was there. I dare say I hope it's more than that today, because I don't think you could do laundry for $15 a month.
Well, I thank the senator. I wonder if I could ask the senator to reflect a little bit on some of the practical consequences of a student athlete suddenly finding himself thought of as an employee of the university. I wonder, for example, would the employee of the university, the quarterback or whatever position he plays, have to pay taxes on his income? I would think so. I was thinking about the recent changes in labor law that allow for micro-unions. Almost any little group can petition the National Labor Relations Board under the Obama administration's views to become a union. I wonder if quarterbacks would become a micro-union and they would say, we're more important. Look at the NFL, they get paid a lot more. We want a bigger scholarship than others. I wondered about, five-star recruits. Let's say there's a terrific defensive back, like I'm sure Senator Burr was when he was in high school, and he has 5 stars from all the recruiting services. Would the private schools who are unionized go out and compete to see who could pay the highest salary to the 5-star recruits, a lot less to the walk-on, maybe less for a 3-star? What are the practical consequences of a student athlete suddenly finding himself defined as an employee of the university under the National Labor Relations Act?
Well, let me say to my good friend, as one that remembers August practices in the South, hottest time of the year, 3 practices a day, the first thing that I would bargain out for all players is that I would have to get my ankles taped at 4:30 in the morning, that I'd have to go all day and most of the night, and that I couldn't take that tape off till 8:30 after 3 practices. I'd negotiate away the smell of dead grass in August, a memory that every college football player, matter of fact, every football player has, of that dead summer practice in hot weather. And I plead with those who play today, do you really believe that you can form a team if in fact you've got individuals that negotiate individual things for themselves? If quarterbacks negotiate, they can't be hit, how good is the club, but where is the team? If individuals find that it's advantageous to them because they're stars and they can negotiate it, where have we lost the sense of team sports? The senator from Tennessee mentioned this to begin with. College sports is a lot about the experience. It builds character, builds integrity, it builds drive, it builds resilience. It's not the only thing in life that does it, but to me, for many individuals, for many young men and women, this is the most effective way for them to become leaders. I might say that it's very much the style of our training in the military. As we raise those young officers, they go through a very regimented thing. Imagine what it would be like if we allowed the military to collectively bargain. Well, let me tell you, none of us would feel safe at night because we don't exactly know what they had gone through. Today, we feel safe because we know they've all gone through the same thing.
Mr. President, I think our time is coming toward a close, but we have about 5 minutes left, and then we'll look forward to the comments of the senator from Iowa, and we thank him for his courtesy and allow us to go ahead. But the point of, I guess the message, and I particularly enjoy hearing the Senator from North, I guess the message today is really directed two directions. One is to the NCAA, which is to say, don't think that the attitude of one regional director of the National Labor Relations Board reflects the view of the United States government. It does not. It does not. And the other is to the student athletes. I mean, think about the value of the opportunity you have. I mean, here are two former student athletes of varying talent who benefited enormously from that. There are many others who would say the same. The university doesn't owe us anything. I mean, we owe the university, at least that's the way I feel about it, for the privilege of competing, for the privilege of attending. If I had had a scholarship, that would have been even better, but just the privilege of participating. And to the NCAA and the members of the NCAA. The NCAA has talked about issues like, should we provide more expense money for athletes? I mentioned earlier that 40% of them have Pell Grants, which can go up to $5,600 a year in addition to their $55,000 or $60,000 of football scholarships. So think about that. And that was considered by the NCAA and voted down because the small schools said it will hurt us. Many of the programs with women's programs says we'll have to drop women's programs. So this is more complicated than it would seem at first. What about health care? Of course, a student athlete can be covered by his parents' health care, and under the Affordable Care Act, I'm sure many on the other side would be quick to say would always be able to be insured for any sort of pre-existing condition. But these are issues that can be properly looked at by the NCAA. Unionization, in my opinion, would destroy intercollegiate athletics as we know it. And I think we should look back to the opinion of the Knight Commission headed by Bill Friday of North Carolina and Ted Hesburgh of Notre Dame, and reaffirm that the student athlete is not a professional, not a hired hand. He or she is a student, 1% of the undergraduates in this country. There may be problems to solve, but the universities and the NCAA can address those problems, and unionization is not the way to do it.
I just wanted to address one last thing, and that's the claim that this case was all about health care. And the senator from Tennessee has pointed out, well, the options that we have today. But let me speak from a firsthand experience. A college athlete, 4 operations, 2 knees, an elbow, a finger. Probably the only record I'll hold at Wake Forest is the total number of inches of scars on my body. And because of modern medicine, that record won't be broken because they don't do surgery that way anymore. But I think it's best summed up by our current Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, when he said this, and I quote, "When sports are done right, when priorities are in order, there's no better place to teach invaluable life lessons than on a playing field or court. Discipline, selflessness, resilience, passion, courage, those are all on display in the NCAA. Why would we do anything to risk that? And not only do I believe this is risky, I think just a consideration of it is enough to make us, or should make us, reject this quickly, not embrace it." I thank my colleague from Tennessee.
And I thank my colleague from North Carolina. I thank the senator from Iowa for his courtesy in allowing us to go ahead, and I ask consent that an extension of my remarks be included in the record following.